Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankara Sharya Madhyamam Asmadasharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvara Guratmeti Mochi Veda Vibhagine Yom Abda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti, Shanti Shanti Om. Namaste. Welcome to our Vivekachudamani class. We are beginning again. We continue from the verse 92. We are unfolding the session of the benefits or how the self-realized person behaves or experiences the world. You know how is life, how is the life of the self-realized. So what is in there for us? So what kind of benefit the so-called liberated one gets from understanding his or her true nature. So the verse 91, which is the one we begin today, it begins saying that just as the actions done in a dream are dissolved on awaking, the accumulated results of actions, of past actions, are dissolved by self-knowledge. This is the one we begin today, right, David? Okay. Okay, just as the actions done in a dream, so we know we have this experience of dream state almost daily when we sleep. So
I'm sorry. This is verse 91. And
yeah.
You have to 92.
We covered this. We should go on to number 92 because number
92.
one, because we talked about the three levels of reality, the highest empirical and imaginary. I remember that discussion.
Yeah.
And that's verse 91. So we should be in verse 92.
Yeah.
92.
I was getting that sense as I was going through the verse. Yeah. So verse 92, the good or bad deeds done in a dream do not send the waker to heaven or hell. So we are following the same logic. So when we dream, we may have punya dreams or papa dreams, and that will depend on the condition, our mental, emotional condition depends, what kind of vasanas are somehow surfacing in our unconscious mind. And then when we go to sleep, and then some of those energies may come up, and then we experience the dream state. So whatever actions we do in the dream state, when we are just doing what we are doing as a dreamer, they don't really fructify in the sense of in the awakened state. So we can do good actions, bad actions. If we do good actions in the dream, we may have to catch up with the good results of those actions, but it has to be in the same dream, because from dream to dream, the whole scene, changes. So, but if we are doing and if the dream is a little bit, extensive or long, usually the dreams, they go like very fast, But whatever actions we do, we don't really go and experience any benefit, or we don't have to pay for it when we wake up and we become the waker. So there will be no heaven or hell as a result of those actions execute in the dream, once the dreamer turns to become the waker. So it's a very interesting thing that the dreamer is there, and out of the blue, the dreamer becomes a deep sleeper. And then out of a sudden, the deep sleeper becomes the awaker. So it's the same jiva, as we know. It's the same jiva experiencing those three mental states, or states of human consciousness, okay? The same jiva. So it does not go anywhere because it's the same jiva, but somehow it appears in a different state, and then it appears in a different state. And then when we wake up, whatever happened in the deep sleep, and in this case, in the dream, is not going to fructify or affect in the awakening state. So to a certain extent, because as we know, when we have really loved, beautiful celestial dreams, so when we wake up in the morning, our mind is very, very, nicely and calm. There is a little bit of, transfer of quality, mental qualities, from one state to the other. The same way when we are in deep sleep, when we are in the night, we are finishing our day, when we have our mind, and we had a very difficult day, and the mind became too rajasic, and then too tamasic, and then we present bad result, bad actions, bad response to the field, and then that brought about more conflicting karmas and so on. And then we just want to be done with everything. We go and we drink 1, 2, 3 beers, and we want to be done with the day. And then it often happens that we don't have celestial dreams, or we don't have a beautiful deep sleep, because the mind is under pressure, under conflicts or disturbance. So it somehow we need to understand that from one state to another, there is a sense of continuation of one's qualities, mental qualities, you understand? So we have to understand that as well. But in general, whatever actions we do in the dream is not going to produce punya or papa for the awaker in the awakening states, because they are two orders of reality, that somehow they don't really connect directly like that, It's the same jiva, it's the same mind, but the happenings here are going to not really take the jiva to prison. If the dreamer, you understand? If the dreamer kills someone in the dream state, the dreamer may feel a little bit guilt when he wakes up. Have you ever felt that? You have a dream and then you act really bad in the dream, and then you wake up and now you're awake. You know that's not real, but you feel like, oh my God, I feel ashamed. How could I do such a thing in the dream? So a little bit of that, we may still identify regardless of the different states. But generally speaking, so if we do something really bad, we are not going to be punished in the awakening state. We may be punished by ourselves to the extent that we may feel bad about ourselves because in the dream I was trying to hurt someone, for example, So what is the parallel here is the same, it's the dreaming state and the awakening state, they are two parts of these suborders of realities relate to the jiva's mental states, the 3 states of the jiva, okay? So they don't really mix up. The levels of reality discussed in the commentary on the previous verse are defined by their duration. So the previous one was defining those 2 states according to their duration. So what it was, the actions done in a dream are dissolved on awakening. The accumulated results of past actions are dissolved by self-knowledge. So it's a different approach, but it is again related to the 2 states. And the actions done in the dream are dissolved on awakening. The accumulated results of past actions are dissolved by self-knowledge. So on awakening state, so all accumulated results of actions, they are still there operating in our minds, but they get dissolved by self-knowledge, as we have extensively covered last week. And in the dream, it is dissolved like that. In the dream, we woke up, we just look back and say, this was a dream. It's okay. I feel a little bit embarrassed that I was trying to hurt my neighbor or something like that. But but thanks God it's a dream, so I don't need to feel very guilt and so on. But the same way when we wake up from the waking state, which is fully conditioned by the belief that I am the awaker, I am the body-mind in these awakening states in which I can transact with the other objects of the field. There is this solid belief that everything here is real and I am this entity, okay? So when self-knowledge comes, the identity by which the jiva defines itself shifts from the body-mind in the state of awakening to consciousness, is still experiencing the awakening state. So the enlightened one, or the jnani, the self-realized, when he goes to deep sleep, he's as ignorant as any other, because he goes in full tamas, And when he's dreaming, he's subject to whatsoever vasanas are still projecting those realities, Of course, in the awakened state, the jnani can hold such a beautiful certainty of self-knowledge and this subtle inner discrimination that sometimes the dreams may be conditioned by that kind of activity as well. And one time I had a conversation with Ramji about that because I was dreaming. I was so much into Vedanta in the beginning, doing this discrimination. And then when I went to the dreams, the discrimination was happening in the dream. And then I was telling him, so it's amazing. I was there and I was discriminating. And then at a certain point, I was discriminating, say, oh, this is the dreamer and this is the dream. So this is really, I don't need to even bother to be discriminated. So, and he enjoyed that. And he said, wow, this could make a very good satsang, Arlindo. That was at the very beginning of my contact with Ramji. So, but going back to the 92, the good and bad deeds done in a dream do not produce punya or papa in the waking state. The levels of reality discussed in the commentary on the previous verse are defined by their duration. So what it means that when we awake, the structure of this Vyavaharika plane, projection by Maya Ishvara is very, very, very solid, tangible, and is structured in a way by time and space that allows experience to be processed in such a way that we can produce further development or understanding, or we can learn. You can learn much more. We can almost learn nothing. The intellect in the dream state is not very effective in learning and processing karma and experience, So it is in the waking state that we have an intellect and we have the field of experience is structured in a certain way that we can go slowly and we have the opportunity to learn from experiences, So the duration is the key here. In the dream state, it goes like boom, 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 boom. You can live a lifetime in 15 minutes, as opposed to the awakened states that 24 hours in a day, you have to go like, through every one of the experience that Ishvara presents to us. Yeah? That which is truly real, the highest level, which is Paramatika, transcends space-time. That which is empirical is an imaginary lasts for longer or shorter periods, respectively. So we make a distinction here between the Paramatika Satya, which is the only reality, which is before or beyond space and time, in which there is no duality, there is no subject-object. And then when we shift into the jiva states of consciousness, we have jiva with the three states, and we have the jiva who is experienced with seeing this other order of reality called the Pratibhasika Satya, which is an empirical order of reality projected by Maya Ishvara. It's not really real, but it's there. It is solid. It is tangible. It is structured by time and space, okay? But there is another order of reality, which is the subjective order of reality, which is the Jiva's interpretations of the empirical order of reality projected by Maya Ishwara. So it says this in the highest level, there is no time because Paramatika transcends time. But in the empirical and the imaginary, they are bound by time. They are defined by time and space, and the timing is different. So the imaginary lasts longer and shorter, respectively. Okay, so when we experience Jiva's subjective order of reality in relation to the field, that goes very, very slow. But when it's Jiva projecting the state of dream state, that goes very fast, So I don't know if you heard, there are a lot of people who believe that there are these other dimensions in which you live like you think, and then immediate things manifest. I don't know if you ever got into those circles, it's about manifesting reality. You go in these orders, in these dimensions, and then there you think and you manifest, which is not much different from what happens unconsciously in the dream state. In the dream state, thoughts produce those reality that goes like pa 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 pa. Dreams are regarded as the product of imagination because their objects do not carry over into the awakened state, but immediately dissolve when we regain consciousness of the physical body and the physical environment. So when we awake, we neither suffer, we neither enjoy, nor we enjoy the consequence of the events that occurred in dream. And this seems quite natural to us, for the dreamer no longer exists. So we say, okay, the dream is gone, so there is nothing to be concerned here. No, it's natural. It's just something that happens. Nobody thinks about how it happens, why it happens, why I dream. Very few people get really like, wow, so what is this? Or the dreamer no longer exists. And as the dream world depends upon his existence, that too disappears. So when we no longer identify with the body-mind, we awake from this dream of the not-self, so to speak, and recognize that whatever occurred in the dream of Maya Ishwara, in which I'm integral part, acting out, fulfilling, or playing my role as a Jiva, the experience knowing entity. So we become aware that all of that, everything that happens in this projection of Maya Ishwara has no effect upon us. So the same way the results of those actions by the Daijasa, which is the dreaming entity, does not have effect upon the waker. So the actions performed by the waker, they do not affect the self. Does not affect the Jivan Mukta, because the Jivan Mukta understood that my true nature is consciousness. And I was acting with the sense that I am the body mind and I am the doer. And now that I realize my higher nature, and then I say, okay, so there is a shift of identification. And this shift allows me to see the Maya project, the Maya dream, as well as something that does not have effect upon me consciousness. Okay, so it's all about that. But this is not to say that action-reaction does not continue in the field in which the body-mind operates, but that we no longer confuse the self with that time-bound world of passing objects. The same principle, nothing changed, at the same time everything changed, right? The world continues, the three states continue. So the body mind, it continues responding, operate, but the Yanni no longer believes that he's the body mind, and he has, therefore, he's free from the results of those actions. because he's not confused his higher nature with his inferior nature. If we are totally identified with our inferior nature, we are caught up into karma, the wheel of samsara, and we're going to be confused, because we will believe that we have a certain control until we understand that Ishvara is doing the whole shebang, as some say in the USA. This is not to say that action does not continue, but rather that we no longer confuse the self with that time-bound world of passing object. Karma is perceived as insentient. Again, I think last week we talked about karma, actions, and the experience being something inert, insentient, okay? So this karma is seen, although this is all Ishvara and all of this is a living conscious being, but from the standpoint of consciousness and reflect consciousness, So Ishvara is not a jiva, it means to say he's not really a conscious or sentient being. He is just a being made out of knowledge, of pure knowledge and intelligence. But all this, as it says here, karma is perceived as insentient because all these actions are just part of this system called Ishvara. And they just happen. It appears that I am consciously deciding, I do this, I don't do that, I go right, I go left. It's my personal decision, but all these karmas are somehow very nicely seen as belonging to Ishvara, and there is nothing personal from the standpoint, I am doing this and that, therefore I feel that, it's my responsibility at this point. And at the same time, we understand that Ishvara is not a person, so therefore there is nothing personal. The jiva understood that he's not really the doer, the person is just an appearance, therefore he cannot take it as my actions, and he understands that Ishvara, which is not a person as well, but it's rather an impersonal system, is producing all these actions through its laws and its forces. It is frequently compared to the image that come and go on the surface of a mirror. The mirror, which stands for the self, is alone real, and it remains what it is before, during and after the appearance of the image. And that is so true, So the Jnani just see everything happens and he knows that there is so much dynamics and actions and movements and things and mental movements, and he has this sense that nothing is really moving at the same time. That is the meaning of understanding action in action and inaction in action. So in the midst of all these actions, so the Jnani sees himself almost like a mirror. He does not move, but all reflect images are moving very dynamically, okay? So any commentaries, questions, or doubts about?
Arlindo, so in dreams, it's a projection of the vasana. And so is the reason that you don't do karma, you don't create karma in dreams because the intellect is so not there and there's no real discrimination going on and making choices? Or is that true?
Yes, it is on those lines. You see, the actions we do in the dream state, they don't come loaded with that sense of doership. And furthermore, the moment that we awake, we discharge everything. We just which is we guys say now that nothing, there were no real actions taking place there. Okay. So I was opening a parenthesis to say that there is a little bit of results or effect from the actions in the dream state. You see, the dreams are those mental emotions, impressions that remains in our subtle body, okay? And then when we go to sleep, they remains there. And then everything turns off when we go into deep sleep. But if we have a lot of these, rajas, usually what projects the dream states is rajoguna, raja, it takes energy. And if the mind is too agitated, under too much pressure or impression, you understand? And then this comes out. But sometimes it can be very loft dreams, like beautiful projections, that say, wow, everything is so beautiful and so on, So, but generally speaking, the content of our minds, somehow they shine, okay? It shines. That's why it's called the shiny one, Taijaza, okay? The one that shines the contents of its own mind, okay? So it's inner reality, So when this happens, the vasanas are just expressing themselves from deep sleep in which nothing is being projected, and then slowly they come and then they project, and then they subside again, okay? So this is the mechanism. The vasanas, they just projecting the contents of the mind with the help of Rajoguna, okay? So now your question, what happens with the results? Is it going to produce any results of karmas? The verse says no, because when you wake up, you are in another suborder of reality or state of the jiva. The jiva is going to find himself in another order. And in that order, what was really done in this order, meaning the dream state, does not apply to the waking state, okay? Except for those subject impressions of feeling like, oh, it's so beautiful. I had such a night. I don't know if you remember those days that you wake up in the morning and you say, oh, God, it was so beautiful. I feel so lifted up and so on, because I had a lot of dreams, So, but generally speaking, because it's a different order, because the sense of doership is not as solid, because the ego is not solidly present, it's almost as if it happens impersonally. There is no jiva taking really personally, owning the action, and having to deal with it's just upon awakening that the awakening jiva is going to say, oh, it was my dream. But a lot of the time you say, but who cares? It's a dream, So the ego, the intellect is not properly functioning. That's why the nature of these discussions are very subtle. That's why Ramji was interested in having a satsang on those lines. Because how can we go into dream and carry on doing this discrimination, doing our Vedantic work in the dream? So it's something, very, very subtle and very nice. And of course, when I had that dream, it was a very sattvic dream, a nice kind of dream in which I was challenging. The intellect somehow was still active in that experience, in that state. So I don't know if I did cover your question or your.
Yeah, it seems it's more lack of doership than lack of intellect.
Yeah, or even both, because the ego is the intellect. The intellect decides and responds and acts, and it somehow identifies with the actions. So the intellect and the ego, they are not very present, That's why in general we don't grow through that state, because we don't, our intellectual faculty or the ego faculty, is not really intelligent or conscious or sharp. So that's why we say it's not really my conscious state. My conscious state is awakened state. When I go into dream sleep, I'm experiencing my subconscious mind, you know? Yes, David.
So we're talking about this in the context of the benefits of liberation. So the reality of the dream, the deep sleep dream and the awakened state seems to be the same regardless of where you are or where if you're liberated or not. It's the same. So I'm not sure I'm understanding or seeing the benefit of liberation in this discussion or in this verse.
Well, Vedanta does not claim to change or to transform one's dream experience into a beautiful and lofty and celestial dreams. No, Vedanta does not claim that. So what happens that we need the awakened state to work through our inquiry, our discriminations, and so on, and then the benefits we reap the benefits in the awakened state, you know. But this does not mean to say that the self-knowledge does not improve the state of the dreamer and the state of the deep sleeper. The state of a deep sleeper, when I was younger and I used to live a very rajasic life, I always had difficulties to sleep because my mind was too agitated, too stressed, you know. So, and with all, with Vedanta and everything that did unfold, my dream becomes more easy, more profound, less and less a fact. Why? Because sleep is a bonus. It is punya, it's merit. I remember one guy on those days with Papaji, that Papaji liked the guy very much. And he was not hiding from anybody his affection for that Italian guy. And he made sure that the guy would stay in Lucknow and open a restaurant and so on. And then after some time, this guy who was becoming very popular because he was getting so much juice from Papaji, he was saying like, yeah, but I have to tell one thing, you know, I suffer of insomnia because I can't sleep. You know, I go until late in the night, and for my surprise and for the surprise of many of us, Papaji just demolished the guy in front of everybody. Say, yes, you don't sleep because you don't have merits, you know. For sleeping, you need punya, you need a good life, you need good karma, you understand? And the fact that you don't sleep indicates, you know, that you have a lot of papa that is preventing you from sleep. You know? So when we begin, you know, clearing all these vasanas or converting those, you know, conflicting vasanas into spiritual vasanas, and then with self-knowledge and so on, the quality of our sleep, not only dream, but the quality of the sleep improves, and the dream improves as well. Did I ever share with you when I first went to India and I stayed in the ashram of Osho Rajneesh in 1987, maybe it happened, and that I was there. I was coming from Hamburg, where I was working very hard under a lot of pressure and stress for 6 months. And then I was dying to get to Pune, and I finally made it to Pune. So after a month or two there, tuning into that energy of meditation and having darshans or satsangs with Osho even twice a day in the beginning. Understand? So in that energy field, as we used to call it, I had one day this experience in the middle of the night that I was being tortured in a desert by two guys, tortured to death. You understand? And it was a dream, but it was more than a dream, because it was so intense that my body contracted in such a way that it took me about a month to recover. My whole body was stiff, and I had to do a lot of acupuncture and massage and several things to begin walking again, just to give you the dimension of how deep that release of that impression that was being held in my soul from previous births. You know, it took place, and then, and my body was there. I was reliving the experience of being tortured to death, you know, in a desert. So that's to illustrate, you know, that the quality of our dreams can be as extreme as the one I had, depending on what kind of stuff, you know, of this mental emotional material I still have in my unconscious mind. So when I begin talking to some friends, and some of my friends who are therapists, kind of famous therapists, and they say, wow, that's very good. It is a mental release of old stuff, you know, most from previous lives and so on. So whatever we have in, you know, it has somehow to come to the light of consciousness. So, and that's, again, is part of what we call mental purification, David. Okay. So the purpose, going back, the purpose of self-knowledge is not to transform our dream state and our sleep state, but transform our lives in the awake state. But all the work is all done in the awake state, and it serves the purpose. But there is a benefit for our dream and awakened state as well. But when I said that when we dream, when we sleep, we are as ignorant, because in order to sleep, we need to be totally unconscious. Yeah? The conscious mind has to be off, so that we have to be totally tamazic to go into deep sleep. Yeah? That's what I meant. And we want to be ignorant in deep sleep. We don't want to be there, you know, you know, as a mind, as an intellect trying to, no, we just want to rest the machinery, you know, the equipment. It's interesting because in a way, when we look into the teachings from a different angle, we say that the prana jiva, the deep sleeper, is almost enlightened. Why? Because he experienced non-duality. He experienced the fullness of, you know, of non-duality. There is nothing going on. There is just, you know, a subtle, extreme subtle reflection of the self in the causal body, which does not produce objects of experience. You understand? So we say that it's almost enlightened, but the truth is that there is nobody to be enlightened there, although there is a very nice and pleasant experience that we recall upon awakening, but there is nobody there because we are put to sleep, right? By Ishwara, by the grace of Ishwara, and as Papaji said, this is grace and this is merit. Verse 93, the liberated are free of experience and is impartial toward them. They do not worry about the future. So this is another characteristic, you know, is not to worry about the future. So the jiva, the samsari, is all the time worried about the future because life is very, very uncertain and insecure. And then everybody is worried. So what this, what that, and if I lose my job, and if I lose this, and you know, if I lose my land. So why? Because the samsari is totally identified with the body mind, and he believed to be a person, and he believed that he needs to not only gain, but maintain or retain all his possessions, all his circumstances and situations and people and place and circumstances. So his one's insecurity derived by the self-ignorance makes the jiva vulnerable and worry about the uncertainty of mithya. Mithya is uncertain, as we know, no? But on the other hand, the Yanni, he's free or she is free of experience. And free of experience means to say the experience take place, but there is no craving for experience, you understand? So the Yan is not against experience because experience is consciousness in contact with objects. So consciousness in contact with objects brings about what we call experience. So experience is consciousness, you know, in association with object that sometimes is referred to consciousness in its relational status, right? Relational status, because consciousness relate to object, it's called experience. Yeah? So, but the liberated know that experience take place because they belong to Maya Ishvara, and but he's free from the need, you know, from craving. I need to have an experience. I need this. I need this. I need that. And not only I need this, but I need exactly the way I want, right? Because if we would have a craving for experience, Aline is having a good laughter now. If I would have a craving for experience, but I would be impartial toward them, as the same sentence is saying, okay, I have a crave for experience, but I am impartial. I mean, all experience, I'm an experienced jungle, and I like all experience. So, and then I'm in a good position, you know? I am impartial towards experience. I accept and I enjoy all experience. But no, the Yanni, the samsari usually, he craves experience, and he craves the ones that are in accordance with one's likes and dislikes, one's vasanas. Huh? So on the other hand, the liberated are free of experience, meaning to say he has no need or cravings. He knows he cannot stop experience. It belongs to Ishvara, but he's free from the need to experience as a mean to complete oneself. No, the samsari wants experience because by the means of experience, I can get okay. I can, you know, make myself good, secured, and happy, and satisfied, and so on. And he says that the liberated is not only free, but knowing that experience is something unavoidable, he or she is impartial toward them. So the impartiality toward the experience is due to the fact the experience is unavoidable. So whatever comes, you know, if it's good, if it is pleasant, it is favorable to my preference or likes, you know, good. If it's not, so, you know, that is what happens to the mind of the liberated. And of course, they do not worry about the future. Or if they worry, you know, they immediately they recover, they repose themselves, because the self-knowledge, when it is properly assimilated, it's always available to correct ourselves, you know. So it means to say that the Yanni, he will never have a human reaction, but even when those human reactions, you know, based on some rajas and tamas is still residing, you know, immediately Yanni recompose itself and remains again established by the means of that knowledge which is always available. No? That's the beauty of knowledge, self-knowledge. As long as we think we are the body-mind, we pursue experience that we think will make us happy and run for those we think, run from those we think that makes us unhappy. We always categorize events based on this criteria. Events, oh, this is a good event, oh, this is a bad event. And sometimes a bad event is necessary, you know, and we don't have that understanding usually. We say, no, a good event is a good event. We had an interesting situation when we bought this place here. We brought it from from people from Spain that used to live here. They came back here to sell, and they run into a lot of trouble because in order for us to give the money to them, they had to open a bank account, and then they discovered that it's very difficult now to bring the money to Spain. So in the last moment, they failed to get organized, to transfer, to find a way to transfer it all at once or partially. And they had to go back, and they went too. And I was telling them, go only you, the guy, because you have to work, and leave her here. I will help, and so we will help her so she can stay here and do. And he said, no, it's too hard, it's too stressful, it's too difficult. I don't want her to go through all this trouble alone. I'm going to go back with her. I take my baby with me, and then I come back. It's going to cost me a fortune to come back in December, but I don't want to expose my girlfriend to this sort of adversity, you know? And I told to the guy, no, it's too much of a problem, too much of a stress. I say, problem is good. And the guy was surprised. He said, what? Are you crazy? Problem is good. You know, problem is good in many sense. So it's good because, you know, it's happening, and it means it's my problem that come. I better exhaust it, you know, and not only. So problem is going to make my mind strong if I don't run away every time I have a problem. In the USA, there is a proverb that says that which does not kill me makes me stronger. So life is nothing but again and again dealing with problems that need to be resolved. And the way we do it, the more we resolve a problem, more we grow in confidence, our mind becomes stronger. We can handle those big cries when they come. We can handle them better, you know, because we have the strength and the confidence and the balance to deal with problems. So we don't want to have unpleasant experience, but until we understand that these adversities are good in many sense. So our life becomes a ceaseless ebb and flow of pleasure and pain, fear and aversion, and the peace we so long for is only fleeting, tasted when desire momentarily abates. The liberated no longer identify with the body-mind, which is the locus of experience. So experience happens to the body-mind, in the body-mind, in the mind of the body-mind complex. So the liberate no longer identify with the body-mind. So the liberate is free of all the contingencies of this world regarding all events, with an evenness of mind that comes from detachment. Evenness, so he has that sense of impartiality or equanimity towards events. You know, this evenness of mind comes from discrimination and dispassion or detachment by the understanding, you know, that events and objects and circumstances cannot really affect the liberated one, the yani. So therefore it is free of the contingencies of this world regarding the ups and downs and the cries when they come, because of the evenness of mind, which is the byproduct of dispassion or detachment. You understand, David? So there is a lot in self-knowledge for us. So it's worth going for. And I'm really so happy to see you going for it, David.
But one thing that's striking me is I feel like there's a benefit here. It's a freedom from having to or a need to judge. I just always feel like as a jiva, I'm judging everything, and everybody else is judging everything, and it's good or it's bad, it's a pleasure or it's pain, it's this, it's that, and you know what somebody does, I'm judging them for what they do or how they look or anything else like that. And when we really practice impartiality, then that's an alternative to judging. So I don't judge things. I just accept things.
Yeah,
Things are what they are. They're all gifts. And so I see that as a benefit that's kind of embedded in here as well, is that
totally.
we don't have to judge everything.
Totally. So we judge. I mean, you use this word judge, but we keep using the mind, running the mind, trying to sort out the events and the objects that are being presented to us. And we do that based on what we like and what we don't like, what I appreciate. And then we are judging everything. We are discriminating based on what. I mean, I like, it's pleasurable, or I don't like. So this is very tiring, and the Yanni it enjoys this sense of equanimity, which is here described by the word detachment, and evenness of mind, the equanimity of mind, mental balance, because that the way to utilize the intellect is not being all the time running the program of what I like, what I don't like, what's going to give me pleasure and security and what is not. And then we end up judging others as well based on the way we judge things and we judge ourselves. So it becomes a useless and very tiresome mental activity running, in our system, which is not really conducive to self-inquiry and self-knowledge. So yeah, people who judge everything and all the time comparing and it's usually a very stressful condition. To revert the metaphor used in the previous verse, the liberated know they are the mirror in which events are reflected. So the liberate, in respect to this metaphor, know they are the mirror in which events are reflected. They do not confuse awareness with the objects that appear on its surface, so to speak, but simply observe them as they come and go, knowing they have no substance. So it is about that. It's to understand that your consciousness and the thoughts that occur in the consciousness that we are, do not really have power. Those vasanas, those tendencies to think, feel, and say, and act, they fade in intensity gradually, and there is this sense of witnessing, and observing things with a sense of detachment. So he knows that he is the consciousness, and the objects, the events, and the thoughts are reflecting, but they don't affect the Yanni because they do not confuse awareness with the objects that reflect on its surface, so to speak, but simply awareness observe them as they come and go, knowing they have no substance. I mean, they are not really real. You understand? They just happen to be here, but they don't affect. I don't change with experience. When we know such events are merely images that flash upon the mirror of awareness, which is our very self, our anxiety in regards to what's happening in the world and so on, our anxiety dissolves gradually, as does every image that manifests briefly and tempts us to believe it is real, even as it fades into the changeless being from which it arose. Very poetic. So when the Yanni understands that every event is just superimposition of projections or objects occurring within, the scope of conscious awareness, this a merely image that flash upon the awareness, this awareness which is our very self. And then what happens to the Yanni? anxiety gradually diminish, as does every image that manifests in the mind, in the consciousness. So you see, not only the anxiety diminish gradually, but this thought, this thinking process that is so intense, you understand? We start just tranquilizing itself, slowing down. So that's what it means here. So when you understand that these thoughts and objects are images appearing in consciousness, which is his or her very self, the anxiety gradually fades, dissolves, as every thought and image that manifests briefly come and go, tempting us to believe it's real. So all this thinking process, you know, as we have heard Ramji saying several times, a thought and an object are two sides of the same coin. So the thought appears in our mind and the objects are appearing, or they are just appearing, the objects are appearing as thought. This is very intense until this understanding grows roots, and then we see all of that as superimpositions on myself as awareness. And not only that, all those thoughts, all these superimpositions gradually diminish and dissolve, and they no longer are there, again and again, tempting us to believe that I should follow this thought, I should follow this object, and I should run here and there to get or to avoid, and so on. So, repeating, as does every image that manifests briefly, thought image, and tempts us to believe that this thought is real, even as it fades into the changeless being from which it arose. Very nice, huh? So it means to say that this knowledge, as it fructifies, it turns the mind more peaceful as well, David. So it's not enough to get this clear understanding that all thoughts and objects are just media, and they are just superimposition, they are projections, and I am consciousness. But this understanding, it should somehow impact our thinking process to the extent that they begin, slowing down and fade. Because what keeps them running and intensively coming again and again and changing is our belief that these thought objects are real, and I need to engage them so to get or to avoid things, and to, as a means to resolve myself. You understand, David?
I'm understanding, but I'm also thinking, and this may be a Thursday discussion, that experiences happen to us, and it happens to the jiva, happens to the body mind. So I'm just thinking of a simple thing like the heat goes out, the furnace no longer works, and it's going to be cold, and the impact is there's no heat. So this is happening. This is an experience, and it's impacting you physically. And so if you don't, you can't ignore it. You can't say, oh, it's going to go away, or it's just temporary, or something like that. I mean, I can't. If it's physical, if I get thrown into a cold stream, I have to get out. I can't just pretend like it doesn't really have impact. I mean, I have to get out. So I'm thinking about this. It's like, well, I'm liberated from when thoughts occur and deal with them. But when something is physically being experienced that I have to, from a survival point of view, fix, then I don't have that luxury to reflect upon it that way. So.
Well, there is a difference because the jiva, even after self-knowledge, is designed to respond, okay, to the environment. So if there is a situation that is threatening one's life, one is going to respond. But the way the samsari would respond to a situation like that and the way a yani would respond, generally speaking, is very different, you know. Even if the yani may appear to respond, you know, very actively to save his skin. You remember that story about the guru who started running because there was a lot of elephants rushing and running over the ashram. And then and the yani was always saying, this is all an illusion. These elephants, these trees, and this world is not real. But when these hundreds of elephants started running over the ashram, the guru was the first running very fast. You know, this is instinctive. It's built into the survival. And then the yani, the guru, ran, and saved himself because he climbed the tree. And then later on, his disciples challenged him, say, Swamiji, you keep saying that none of this is real, and you run like crazy. You run more than us, you know. And he said, oh, did I run? Yes, okay. You know, it was, I don't know if I will remember how to close this joke. He said, it was the apparent Swami running from the apparent elephants and climbing an apparent tree. You understand? So this is a joke, but it means to say that our human nature, this instinct to survive, it's going to play equally, you know. But usually the reaction of the yani is smoother and more elegant in respect to extreme adversities, you know.
Well, okay, so I thought it was muted. The heat goes out, and your immediate reaction might be, it is like, this is awful, and I hate it, and I judge it that the heat went out, and instead I could be impartial to it. The heat went out, and I have to do something about it, which is fine, and I will do something about it. But I'm not like, I don't find it as disruptive. I'm not mad. I'm not upset. I'm not, you know, it is temporary. It is going to pass. We're going to figure this thing out. And so from a yani point of view, it's really how you choose to react to maybe the physical discomfort.
Yeah.
So even if I get thrown into a stream, I have to get out. But whether I get out and laugh about it or whether I get out and get really mad about it, that's really, you know, that may be a choice that I'm making in terms of my reaction to it. Yeah.
So these extreme events, and they bring about very fast and I would say instinctive reactions, and the quality of these reactions, they are going to depend on how wise or how deep this self-knowledge have grown roots. And I often say that the self-knowledge, as it grows roots into the causal body, you understand? It's not only on the conscious mind, but it went into the unconscious mind as well. And then these instinctive reactions, they are going to come as well with the flavor of knowledge, you understand? So both are instinctive, but the yani, the one who have this knowledge deeply, you know, the pause or you know, residing in the causal body, the quality of one's vasanas, one has a lot of self-knowledge or knowledge-based vasanas, you know. The instinctive, the survival instinct is going to play, but it's going to play in a more smooth and elegant way, usually, you understand? It's all about that.
I think
The knowledge.
I think it comes with knowledge. It comes with, and that comes with that's where the impartiality comes into play.
Yeah, as well. Well, I mean, you see, Paramarthananda, he likes to put it that this self-knowledge has to be properly internalized and processed and digested so that it impacts the way we respond to the events of life. And we the biggest test is the way we respond to big adversities, you know, when the adversities are very big, and then you see how deep or this self-knowledge has grown, you know, because when everything is going good, I mean, it's relatively easy to stay balanced, you know? But when things are really tough, and then we see. So that's why Swami Paramahansa likes to say that the self-knowledge needs to transform somehow one's emotional personality, so that we can say that it has fully manifest or fructified. You understand? Verse 94, space is not affected by the objects sitting in it, nor by the smell of liquor. The self-awareness is not affected by the attributes of the limiting adjuncts. So this is a very nice analogy. I like this analogy about the smell of liquor because especially hard liquor, it's one may buy some liquor and then make a party, and then you go through the entire bottle of hard liquor. But the smell of the liquor, it still remains in the bottle. There are some impressions, you know, of the, you know, the upadi. It still remains a little bit attached to the bottle. Yeah? Space is not affected by the objects. Yeah, the objects, they appear in the space. The space permeates and provides all objects, and space is never affected by any object. A building can be, you know, raised in space, and then 100 years later on, it may be demolished, and then another building may come, and in space remains unaffected. So that's why space is such a good analogy to our nature as consciousness, okay? So space is not affected by the objects that, you know, come and go within space, and nor by the smell of a liquor. So space is not affected by the smell of a liquor. The self-awareness is not affected by the attributes of the limiting adjuncts. The same way the self-consciousness is not affected by the attributes, the constitution, the configuration of our body-mind complex, okay? So the limiting, that's what defines the jiva, that's what limits the jiva, is what is going to feel like being affected by experience. But the self is not affected by experience, and is not affected by the attributes, qualities, and properties of our body-mind construct. So it means to say the self-awareness is not affected even by our mental condition. It is very interesting because we feel like, oh no, my mental condition needs to be so and so, so that I can be unaffected by the events of mithya, you know. So once we understand that the self is never affected, and then even if the mental condition is different, one may have a different reaction according to one's mental condition, but still this knowledge is going to neutralize that reaction, because we say, no, I am not really affected by any event, and I'm not affected by the mental reaction, not even by that, once this knowledge is properly retained, okay? So I want to read again, because I'm not quite recalling this analogy of the smell of a liquor, but it's going to unfold here. Space is not affected by the object sitting in it. Space is not affected by the smell of a liquor. It's the smell of a liquor in a bottle. The bottle is going to remain there. The bottle was full of whiskey, and then we drink the whiskey, the five of us, and then now instead of we having whiskey in the bottle, we have space in the bottle. And the bottle is emanating that smell of a liquor, but the space does not mind. Understand? It does not get affected by anything, much less by the smell of a liquor. The self does not lend itself to analogy. So this is interesting because every analogy we have to try to understand our conscious awareness, yeah, we use this analogy, but every analogy falls short because there is nothing really that can demonstrate the true nature of conscious awareness, our real nature. Yeah? But it serves a lot of purpose because we understand a little bit of our nature by this analogy, that metaphor, and then slowly, and then one day we are clear about our true nature. And then we understand that every one of these analogies or metaphors do not really cover, the what we really are. Yeah? Do not really illustrate or explains. No? So it says the self does not lend itself to analogy, for it manifests every object to which it might be linked as an analogy. So the self is manifesting these objects, including space. Now, how can space define consciousness by the means of analogy? Consciousness manifests everything. Yet, when we use words as an aid to understanding the self, space provides us the best possible analogy available. It's the space and the light are the best analogies to describe what we are. So space is formless. We know that space has no shape. Yet, every form, every shape depends on the space. So how about consciousness? Consciousness has no form. It's free and independent of every form, yet every form depends on consciousness. Likewise, the space is free and independent from forms. But no form can exist without the space, because space is the container for all forms. Yeah? They appear out of the space. Everything appears within consciousness, out of consciousness, in association with Maya, and the space is the primary element. And then out of the space, the universe unfolds. Okay, so the space is the closest thing we have to explain the true nature of Mithya. Yeah? Space is formless, yet all forms appear in space. Space is not restricted to any location. The objects, they have to be located somewhere in space. No? But space is not located because he's the container, he's the locker, in which every object is going to take place. And that goes for consciousness as well. Consciousness is all over the place. It's beyond space, beyond time. It does not exist here and there, Yet all objects are located in consciousness, located in space. Space is not affected by the object that appear in it or by the absence of any object. The absence of any object is important as well. Because for those who believe that, the space needs an object to exercise its power of spacing. No, the space is going to be spacing regardless of object or non-object. Space is not measured by time. Yet time is measured by space. So we have space there. Time cannot measure space because space is, it's the most pervasive element, principle of Mithya. But then when the objects begin forming themselves in space, and then we come into time, okay? And then time is being a byproduct of this space. Is going to depend on space, but space is not measured by time, and space does not depend on time. Yet time is measured by space, that is, by the distance in space between all these appearing objects. In sum, Space is all pervasive. Is it really all pervasive space? It is all pervasive in Mitya. So it's a byproduct of the self in association with Maya and Ishvara, and then there comes the first element. And this first element is going to, to produce, to unfold into all the other elements. And it's going to be pervading all these other elements, including space and earth and water and everything, the spaces that pervade. It's omnipresent and it is timeless. It's so close to be the same thing as consciousness, right? It pervades everything, it's everywhere, and it's timeless. Most of these are, in fact, no attributes, but they are the nature of space or the negations of attributes. The nature of consciousness, the nature of space is the absence of attributes or the negations of attributes, okay? It's the base on which attributes, which refer to the objects appearing in space, they develop those attributes. Most of these are, in fact, not attributes, but negations of attributes. This verse refers to the concept of the limiting adjunct called an upadi, which we described in previous verse as that which has no nature of itself, but which appears to exist due to its proximity to something else, as in the case of the crystal and the rose. The upadi in this example, in the example of the road, as we know, is the redness of the crystal, which does not belong to the crystal, but belongs to something which was in close proximity. It's a mere appearance produced by the rose being near the crystal. All that we ascribe to the body-mind is like the redness of the crystal. Okay? Everything that we ascribed for the body-mind, and we take the body-mind to be the self, is like the redness of the crystal, the gunas, the energies, the attributes. They are just there coloring the Jiva-Atma being Paramatma. It takes the upadi to be the true self. All such attributes are appearance made possible by their proximity to the self. So we have the self, we have Jiva-Atma, which is Paramatma, but due to the proximity to the self due to the proximity to this body-mind complex, it appears as if the self is taking the attributes of the body-mind construct. The body-mind construct, they belong to the body-mind construct. They are product of Maya, Ishvara, and they are not the self. The self is attributeless, but due to this close proximity, it appears as if the self is colored by these attributes of the body-mind construct. However, the self is in one place and the body-mind is another place very near to it. So what is that? It should not be sought, however, it should not be sought, however, that the self is in one place and then the body-mind is going to come and then the self is going to appear as colored by the attributes of the body-mind. No, it's not like the rose and the crystal that are physically there as an analogy, a metaphor, and then when they come together, the redness of the rose jumps to the crystal. So here, we should not be confused and think that the self is in one place and the attributes of the body-mind are in another place, very near. Nor that the body-mind is really separate from the self. So what does it say? Every analogy falls short, as we know. Okay? So the self is pervading everything. It pervades the body-mind. Okay? And somehow, due to this intimate pervasiveness of the self, you understand? So the self appears as colored by the attributes of the body mind. The same way, if you pour water in a green glass, okay, the water is going to appear to be green. Why? Because it's being pervaded or permeated or contained by the greenness of the glass. Okay, so but we should never think that the self is in one place and the Jiva-Atma is in another place. The self is the substratum, that which pervades the Jiva-Atma. Therefore, the Jiva-Atma has the potential to understand that it is Paramatma in its true nature. Nor the body mind is really separate from the self. It is when we perceive such separateness that the limiting adjunct, the part, appears. It's only when we believe that the body-mind construct is separate from the self, and then immediately the upadi appears as real, you know, all this characteristic appears as to be I the self, you know, because we believe to be separate from the self, and we believe that we are the true self. So very few people have this understanding of what is the true self, you know. Most people in the spiritual world even. Are you still with me? Oh, it seems that it froze nowadays.
Back in again.
Yeah.
Okay, we got back here on time. Just to wrap it up. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are covering that the self, we should never think that the self is separate from the Jiva-Atma and the Jiva-Atma is separate from the self. As we know, the self pervades everything. It is the substratum of Mithya. It's the substratum, the essential nature of Ishvara, Jiva, and the universe, Jagat, okay? The self is always there, penetrating everything. We should never think that this proximity of the Jiva-Atma and the self is literally like the proximity of the rose and the crystal, okay? So there is no separateness. So when we believe there is separateness is when the upadi, poof, shows up, okay? So the upadi becomes real. The self appears to be colored by the attributes which belong to the constitution of this body-mind complex. That's the point. Ignorance arises simultaneously with its perception, and perception occurs in the light of awareness. But as nothing exists outside of awareness, nothing can affect awareness, just as nothing can affect space. So we experience knowledge and ignorance. Ignorance arises, and when it arises, we have knowledge of ignorance. And this knowledge, perception, of course, everything, the whole dynamics happens in the light of I, conscious awareness. But as nothing exists outside of awareness, nothing can really affect awareness, just as nothing can affect space. The limiting adjuncts of the body-mind do not produce any change in awareness. So this is the point. So all these attributes that belong to our body-mind do not affect our true nature as awareness, as we know. The mind changes, the body changes. It's going to be impacted by the object, by the circumstance, by the prarabdha karmas and so on. But the consciousness is always there, okay? Unaffected by anything. Nor do they leave any residue. The limiting adjuncts to the body-mind do not produce any change in awareness, nor do they leave any residue, as suggested by the analogy to the smell of a liquor left behind in a container. So we have the smell of a nectar, he's left in a container, and in consciousness, all these attributes, all these colors, all these smells of the Jiva Atma, of the body-mind construct, they don't leave any residue that could impact, not even as subtle as the smell may impact the space in an empty bottle. So no, it does not leave any residue in awareness, as suggested by the analogy to the smell of a liquor that is left in the container, left in the space in the container. The reference here is to karma, which can produce no effects in the self based on past actions. So no karma can produce any effect on the self. Therefore, when the Jiva Atma understands that his true nature identity as is the self, is consciousness, and then what happens with all actions, all results of actions, they vanish, they dissolve the same way the results of actions of the dreamer dissolves upon awakening, because the Jivatma understood that none of that was done by me consciously, because I am akarta and I don't do anything, so I'm not subject to karma. I'm just free, independent, unconcerned awareness. Therefore, the reference here is to karma, which can produce no effects on the self based on past actions, no future results based on present actions. But the question then arises, if the self is beyond action, why does the one who realized the self remain in a body that continues to function in the field of action? No, that's a question that I'm sure that David was already cooking that question up. No? But the question then arises, if the self is beyond action, why does the one who realizes I am the self remain in the body that continues to function in the field of action? The next session of the text takes upon this question of David. Good. Which is going to be the new theme called the karma of the liberated. Oh, how exciting, huh? Okay, my dear friends.
I was going there. Yeah.
Huh? You are getting there?
I was going there. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't remember this Thursday we don't meet, right? It's Christmas. Is that what I said, or we meet? It's not Christmas, huh?
It's not Christmas. Christmas is Friday.
Right.
Okay. So,
And so
shall we meet? We meet on Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay. Okie dokie. Same time, same day, same
Yeah.
channel.
And Ruth was confused. She's thinking that this class got moved to tomorrow, just so you know.
Yeah. We tried to, I
And
mean, she was too fast to run away. Everybody tried to connect to her. Lynn tried to talk to her, but she was too Rajasic, as it seems. Huh?
and I've texted with her a little bit, but just so you know. Okay.
Okay.
So Thursday
Please,
it is.
let her
Thursday.
know. Let her know that we meet on Thursday, please.
Okay. We'll do.
Okie dokie.
Yep. Okay.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, everyone. We meet again in no time and in no space, because we don't meet. We are that which pervades everything.
Exactly.
The Beatles sang about this. I am the walrus. You are me. Listen to that between now and Thursday. I am the walrus. Okay.
Okay.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.